Hello and welcome to my lecture. My name is Alexander Bauer. I'm from Salzburg, Austria, and the topic of my lecture is the aestheticization of reality. So, a big word, reality, and I'm not going to go into a philosophical discourse about what this means. I want to categorize this a bit. So, reality in this term has to do mainly with perception. So, reality is something which we can perceive with our senses, with our hearing, with our eyes, etc. I want to categorize this into three main branches. So, our perception, at least how I see it in the context of my work, which I'm gonna talk about a bit later, deals with three categories of this. So, the present, the hidden, and the transformed. The category present constitutes of any kind of perceivable sound. So anything which we can hear without any help, which can be noises, this can be a street noise, this can be even music, this can be speech, this can be any kind of sound which we can perceive without any further aid. The hidden category is sounds that are present but are not perceivable to our ear without any help. So we need some form of amplification. This does not only mean sounds, the hidden category would also mean that we find something in the sound which is part of the sound but which can be amplified through compositional processes. The third category, the transformed, which constitutes of the two first category, the present and the hidden, this would mean that we take information or situations from these first two categories and transform it, deform it, play with it. This is what I would say is mainly where the musical composition process is happening. So I'm gonna talk about some of my compositions and how these topics play a role in them. The first piece I'm gonna talk about is Aquariumsleben from 2018. This is a piece which deals with speech, with a text, and the main basis for this piece is information and data from a time frequency analysis. A time frequency analysis shows how the spectrum or the spectral quality of a sound develops over time, and it shows the inner structures of sound. It is a re-sonification. Sonification means to present data acoustically, so this can be any kind of data, this can be weather data, this can be birth rates, it does not really matter. And resonification in this case, because the data itself is derived from an acoustical analysis. The process of this constitutes of the analysis itself, then the data processing, and finally the composition process. So how the data which is achieved through the analysis is used artistically. There's two versions of this piece. There's a duo version which is played with a sampler, a keyboard, and a soprano with a talk box. A talk box is a device which is kind of a loudspeaker in an enclosed space, in a box, with a plastic tube attached to it, which can be put in the mouth, and the sound travels in the mouth and can be shaped depending on how you form vowels or how you speak without your voice. But the sound coming from the talk box is acts as your vocal cords. The second version is an ensemble version for the Salzburg ensemble names. So I'm going to talk a bit about the analysis process. So at first we need a sample which we want to analyze. In this case it's the sentence "Hello world" synthesized with the default voice of Google Translator. This voice is actually also used as the basis of the piece Aquariumsleben. It reads the whole text and is analyzed then. This is the sample which I'm gonna go to analyze.
Hello world.
So the spectral analysis is done in the software Sphere. You can see here that the sound is shown as its spectral components, and their development in time is shown here. And because we have a lot of information here, every partial has information and is present in the data, and it would be a huge list of numbers which we eventually won't use. The first step in this is to reduce this information here onto the most important aspects of the sound. So the loudest partials, which are shown here in a darker color, are kept, and the rest is just thrown out. Then it would sound like this. So we lose a lot in the higher frequencies, but the general harmony and the general melody of the speech stays intact. So the next step is to get this into a format which can be read by a notation program. So this data is imported into PWGL. This is a program for algorithmic composition, and this can transform this data, because this is just a list of numbers, into musical notation, which can then be exported as MIDI. And MIDI can be read by a score writer, in this case MuseScore, and now it's displayed in common musical notation, and it sounds like this, played by a MIDI piano. So we came from the original sample through analysis, through display as MIDI, to something which can be displayed as musical notation and can be further used in the following composition process. So first I'm going to talk about the piano part of the duo version. The piano plays an electric piano, and the sound is not played via normal loudspeakers, but is just played in the talkbox, and the talkbox is projecting the sound into the singer's mouth. So the analysis of the computer voice is played by the pianist, by the piano player, and reshaped by the singer. So what we see here is the MIDI output. This is what I get from PWGL, from the algorithmic composition program. And this is what the piano part looks like. So the first thing we see is that it's a selection process. This is further way more reduced so that it's playable, and then it's also that you can decide which sounds, which tones you want to keep and which you want to throw out. Further changes done to this is that there's some adjustments in time. So every word is kind of a sound object, like an enclosed space in itself. The left hand plays the speech melody. So this is the part which is marked green here. And the right hand does mainly consonants, so t, k, s, and all this. So approximates this. And it also tries to imitate the timbre of the voice via broken chords, higher and lower frequencies, and so on. And there's a leftover from the analysis process. So we see here the analysis is time discrete, so it it takes points in time and looks which frequency is present. And so this is not like a line or something or a melody, but it's like a rapid succession of chords. And this is kept as an aesthetic principle in the piano part via tremolos. So this is kind of a leftover from the analysis process. In the ensemble version, there come a lot of instruments to this. So the piano part is not played live anymore, but it's done electronically. So it's a recording which is played in a talk box, and the instruments which join, they become kind of an intelligent resonance space, an expansion of the voice. This constitutes the possibility of the instrumentation of timbre, of consonants, of prolongation of harmonies, and also of the dissolution of the chromatic scale. So because the piano has only 12 keys per octave, we don't have any quarter tones, we don't have any microtones, and the instruments which are present in this ensemble version, they have these possibilities. So this is a nice way to dissolve this chromatic domain a bit. And it also is the possibility to reinforce structural elements. So, for example, if there's a lot of consonants, the cuts which these consonances do, they are reinforced by the instruments. This is what a page of the score looks like. So we have the voice first here, and it's a mixture about just speaking or mouth movement and singing. We have a bass flute, we have a bass clarinet, we have an acoustic piano with an electric organ, a violin, and this is what the talkbox, the tape, does, which was the former piano part in the duo version. So, for example, here, this is a kind of interplay between the talkbox and the voice. So it changes from playing from the tape to the real voice to the tape again. Mainly the organ does this prolongation of harmonies or anticipation of harmonies. So everything which is there, which is in succession, it happens all at the same time, and so chords are built. For example, like this. This comes from here. This comes from here. The consonants, for example, S, R, K, and T, they are reinforced by the other instrument mainly with extended techniques like a lot of high pizzicati, snap pizzicati, etc., accents, and so on. So the music is actually very close to the speech. And here also these cuts, which are done by the consonants, they are reinforced by the other instruments. So we have a lot of like dynamical movement in at least this part of the piece. And I don't know if you can really see it here, but there is, for example, here through quarter tones in the clarinet and the violin, a dissolving of this chromaticism a bit. So it interpolates between the anchor notes of the piano melody. Let's take a listen. The next piece I'm going to talk about, it's called Vitrinen und Mosaik. It deals also with the topics of the present, but also transformation and deformation. The basis for this is not a recording or not an analysis, it's an existing musical piece, existing musical material, a very old piece from Johannes Ciconia, the motet Ut te per omnes selitus. And this is because it's early music. The instrumentation for this piece consists of early music instruments, mainly a cornet and 3 Baroque trombones. The reality, in this case, not a recording or so, but the score or the piece itself is transformed and deformed. And this is a bit in the idea of an erratic or faulty reading and playing process. Here, a principle of a technique from electronic music, that of a granular synthesis, is applied to the score. Normally it's done with audio files. Audio files are cut into very small snippets of sound, which are then rearranged. So this is kind of the idea of a mosaic, to cut something into very small snippets and then rearrange it again to get something new. This was done with the help of computer-assisted composition, CAC, and the process of this was first to write the algorithm. So I wrote an algorithm which does this, so which cuts up a score into small bits and then rearrange this. Then the definition and fine-tuning of parameters, and then the further composition on the basis of the output which the algorithm gives me. So what happens is, this is a 4-part motet, and we're looking at an example from this is the first voice, and this is what the original, the motet of Ciccone looks like. And this is what the algorithm does. So it builds windows. Every window of this has a little bit random on how long the window is and when it starts in this timeline. And this is what we get from the original. This is the original, and this is the output of the algorithm. It's always a bit like erratic, random. It moves through this material a bit, erratic and random. And this was what the definition and fine-tuning of parameters means. So a lot of, a huge part of this compositional process was to set, for example, how much is the biggest window size and the smallest window size, etc., etc. And so this is done with all 4 voices. And you see what we get here is very complex and not exactly pleasant to play or to read. So in the final score, there is a reduction of the complexity in notation. And a further compositional decision was to apply the thought of erratic, of faultiness, also not just to the rhythm or to the granulation of the voice, but also to the intonation. So we have some kind of intonational blur, mainly done with quarter tones. So we're gonna take a listen in this. So first we hear the beginning of the original motet, and then we hear the beginning of the piece. The next piece I'm going to talk about is Corpus Stadt Finale. It deals with the topics of the present and the hidden, with found objects, which are field recordings from the urban space of the city of Salzburg. This is mostly speech or fragments of conversation, and it has kind of a hybrid form. It's something between sound installation, theater, and a piece of music, an ensemble piece. Just for the setup, there are 6 tracks, so 6 electronic tracks, 6 loudspeakers, and 6 brass instruments. You can see this in this diagram here. So every loudspeaker has one of the instruments coupled to it. So every one of the players sits before a loudspeaker, and the loudspeakers are facing outwards. So the players sit in a circle facing outwards, and the public is free to walk around this space, because there is not an ideal listening position for this piece. The idea is that one can move around in the room and hear different things. The piece was performed in a church, in the Kollegenkirche Salzburg, and it also has a pipe organ, which is in the back. Just some words about the form. The first good half of the piece deals with just imitation. The brass players play along with the tape, which consists of speech fragments. Then there's a part where the speech is slowly deformed, and then I would say quite musical, so to speak, parts, a falling part, which goes from a chromatic total to a spectrum, and a coda with room resonances, so the own resonances of the church space. First, the tape. This was also the first thing to work on in the composition process. The first thing what was done was the recording process, which took 3 months, so more or less, because it was a lot of walking around the city with in-ear microphones which look like earplugs. You put them in your ears, and then you get like a binaural recording of a cityscape. And there was hours and tons of material, which was then in a second step listened completely and evaluated. So what do we take and what not? And from there were snippets of speech and sound derived with durations from 0.5 to up to 10 seconds. The next step was to arrange these files via a random algorithm. So the first thing is you get a very rough collage of just a random arrangement of these snippets. The further composition steps were to work on this collage, for example, to see which files can match, to find some connections between the files and snippets, a little bit about the dramaturgy, to have an increase in density, and also some processing of the sound, for example, granulation, so the sounds are more and more shattered and cut into little pieces. Then colorization via a K+strong synthesis. Explain later what this means. The extraction of the musical material is basically transcriptions for the brass instrument, parts. This was done by ear, so the snippets which we derived earlier were listened to and then just try to write down notes of what we hear, melodies, etc. The following aspects are taken into account while doing these transcriptions. So the melody of speech, so to get kind of musical motives, microtonal aspects of the speech, because the brass instruments are very capable of doing this, especially like trombones or trumpets. They can do microtones quite easily, and also peculiar, so to speak, features of the protagonist. So if someone has a very raspy voice or very nasal voice, I tried to imitate this in instrumentation. What is the very important thing about this, that is this whole thing is a documentary, so the document is important. It's not really important what's on the document, it's or what the people are saying, or what it means what they're saying. It's just the sound of the city. So there's no difference between the sounds of humans or animals or a construction site or traffic. So I'm gonna show a bit the process of how this is done. We have a sample of a woman voice.
Oh Gott. Das war, Moment, das war daneben. Was?
So the first thing is to do a transcription. This is, for example, a trumpet part.
Oh Gott. Das war, Moment, das war daneben. Was?
And in the composition process, this is the score. It is done by the following steps. So first we have a fragmentation of this. So this would be the full form of a transcription, and in the beginning the instruments just play fragments of these samples. Then it's again evaluated if there could be some kind of connections between these samples, so to arrange them a bit in a musical, so to speak, more sensible way. And then the organ part was created. The organ part is, it acts as a connection between the acoustic space, the church, and the brass instrument. It kind of imitates this very long reverb of the church room.
Last time when we were this hunting,
So after we have listened to the excerpt of the first half of the piece, which mainly deals with direct imitation, I'm gonna show a bit how the composition develops. So this is around the 2/3 of the piece. And in the tape there's a lot of granulation and colorization of the material happening. Granulation, so the sound is cut up into little pieces. The speech is becoming more and more fragmented to the point where it's not recognizable anymore. And colorization is done via a technique called Karpulus-Strong synthesis, which is commonly used in physical modeling to imitate plucked string sounds. So basically you apply to a sound signal a delay with a very, very short delay time and a lot of feedback. So the delay time is, for example, 5 to 10 milliseconds or something like this, and so that actually the delay is so short that it becomes perceivable as a tone and not as a rhythm anymore. It sounds like this, done with this speech material. So this is what is happening in the tape, and we also can hear that the tones are rising, so we have a glissando going upwards, and the instruments, they corresponding to this, they take the notes where the tape is at. For example, here in the horn plays an F sharp, so the tape is kind of around an F sharp here, and then the instruments build out a falling gesture, so you have this chromatic descending lines mixing with the tones from the tape. Eventually we arrive in the falling part. So this part is purely chromatic in the brass instruments, and also the organ plays a cluster. And the conceptual idea behind this is that it's an approximation, or at least an idealistic approximation to white noise. So that all frequencies, or all audible frequencies, are present at the same time, which is how the spectrum looks of white noise. Of course, we cannot really imitate that here, but it's a conceptual approach to this. And this chromatic noisy scape resolves into a spectrum over C. Let's take a listen. So to conclude, just a bit of info about the software which was used to create those pieces, and which I use on a regular basis. Reaper as a digital audio workstation, Super Collider and PewData for the sound synthesis, PWGL and Open Music as tools for algorithmic composition, and MuseScore for notating my scores. All of those except Reaper are freeware, and these are very good programs. I can really recommend them. And last but not least, here's my website. If you want to learn a bit more about my work, and now the only thing left to say is thank you very much for your attention, and have a great rest of the festival. Goodbye.